Recording. Thank you, Tim. So this grant is the American Rescue Plan Grants to Support Survivors of Sexual Assault. It's a grant that in Texas is received by HHSC, and then they have contracted with TASA to administer the program. So we serve as a pass-through agency, and that includes subcontracting with organizations to provide the activities. So this is it's supplemental funding. First, I want to say, so as far as we know, the funding will end at the end of the project period, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But having said that, there are folks out there that are working really hard to make this sustainable funding. So we wanted to make sure that we told you that as well. So for this opportunity, I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but I want to tell you about really the heart behind it. So we are wanting to reach organizations that are committed to building a strong sexual assault program, but may not be there yet in terms of meeting the minimum service standards for Texas sexual assault programs. They may not provide all of the minimum services, although to be eligible, you have to be providing some of them. But what we know is that most state funding for sexual assault programs, you have to already be providing services. I believe it's 9 months prior to getting a grant. You have to be providing them according to the minimum standards. So there's just not a lot of funding out there for folks who want to go through technical assistance, who want to meet the definition of, who want to provide the minimum services, who want to meet the minimum standards. And want to really build into those services. So this grant is very targeted. It's a small grant. It's a pilot project. So we are expecting to fund 2 organizations, but that's really the heart of who we want to reach. Those folks who want to build a strong program, want to work with TASA through technical assistance to build their capacity and infrastructure to meet all the requirements that would allow them at the end of this grant to apply for other funding, meaning state funding, if they chose to do so. I'm going to stop. Any questions about that? Or Tim, anything you might want to add?
No, I don't have any.
Okay, thank you. So it's a competitive grant, specific eligibility requirements, which we'll talk about. We expect to fund 2 projects, and applicants will be scored on their responses by non-TASA staff. So we have evaluators that are going to look at the applications, score the applications, and then provide that information to us. So we do have some criteria that's in the funding announcement, but I'll just go through it a little bit now on what you would be scored on. Very heavily scored on activities that fully align with the purpose of the grant, as we talked about. So organizations that really want to build strong sexual assault programs, that want to build their capacity to meet the minimum standards, to provide minimum services. Of a statement of philosophy on prioritizing adult survivors of sexual assault that were assaulted by someone other than a family or household member. So applicants that are committed to meeting the minimum service standards by the end of the project period, that are committed to applying for the Office of the Attorney General Sexual Assault Training Certification by the end of the grant period, the project period. Applicants that are a member of a SART, so a sexual assault response team, in the county where they plan to provide services. And applicants that provide services for survivors served through Text Track statewide SANE telehealth program. And applicants that demonstrate their ability to provide culturally affirming and appropriate services. And that's also defined in the funding announcement. And applicants that provide a letter of support either from a SART or from a community organization, sorry, whose partnership is going to be important to meeting the goals of this grant. And then there are some questions on the application that you'll be able to demonstrate that you have the capacity and the financial controls in place to administer the grant. So who is eligible? So eligible organizations are nonprofits that meet any one of these definitions, and the definitions are in the funding announcement. So they can be a rape crisis center, can be a standalone rape crisis center, or can be a dual program. And by dual program, I mean serving domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. So these organizations that meet that first definition of one of those entities and that currently provide some of the following minimum services. So either like a 24-hour crisis hotline, crisis intervention, public education, advocacy, or accompaniment to hospitals, law enforcement officers, prosecutors' offices, and courts. Do not have to be providing all of these, but would be providing some of these. So I think there's a question. Okay. Client is new, has a partnership with the hospital. Would that be deemed a community partner for the letter? So it can be it can be any community partner. So yes, it could be a hospital, it could be another community organization. There's no real definition of what that organization needs to be, as long as they are really important to you being able to meet the goals of the grant. And those organizations can provide confidential communications as described in the Texas Government Code, Chapter 420, Subchapter D, which there's a link in the funding announcement to this subchapter, so you can see what the criteria would be about providing confidential communications. And who serve adult survivors of sexual assault who are assaulted by someone other than a family or household member. So these would be survivors that would not qualify if you're a dual agency. They wouldn't qualify under HHSC because they were assaulted from someone other than a family or household member. And then we have some things that the eligible organizations do not do currently. So they would not have an active grant through SAPCS with the Office of the Attorney General. They would not currently operate or have historically operated a children's advocacy center, a sexual assault nurse examiners program, any type of forensic collection services program, or they would not currently provide services for any other types of crime except sexual assault, domestic violence within that same organization or under the same umbrella organization. And they also would not have an active ARP-SA grant with TASA currently. I'm going to pause here for a minute to see if there might be any questions about that. So the project period is going to begin October 1, 2023 and goes to September 30th, 2025. The contracts will be for 1 year, and then the second year funding will be distributed via an extension or a similar process. To receive second year funding, we just need to be in good standing. We'll provide information for grantees if funded on the process for the second year funding. What we think is going to look like is to give us a work plan and a budget for that second year. You can request to carry over unspent funds from year 1 to year 2. We'll work with you if that's necessary to figure out how much funds are available for carryover, how you plan to use them, and that will really depend on how you use the first year's funding. And then all of the funding has to be expended by September 30th, 2025. So some funding details. So year 1 and 2, you can ask for a minimum of $125,000, a maximum of $175,000 per year. There's no match requirement. In the application, it's going to ask you what your plans are for year 2, or what you think the amount of money that you want for year 2. That's not to say that if you ask for something, you can't change that in year 2. It's just to give us an idea of budgeting. And the minimums and maximums are set because we know this is going to be technical assistance intensive. It's going to be, time intensive for y'all, and needing the funding to really build capacity to meet those goals of the grant. So some dates. The funding announcement was released July 14th. The application opened August 4th. We really want folks who are going to apply to give us a letter of intent to apply by August the 10th. And this is can be very informal. Email to the ARP-SA email box to let us know that you plan to attend. And Tim, can you put that in the chat? The final day to submit the application, September 1 at 11:59. And then we plan to provide notice of award September 22nd. You will be notified if you apply. You'll be notified one way or another, whether you got the grant or not. And then the project start date will be October 1. So applications must be submitted using form assembly. So the link is here, but it's also in all of the materials that are on our TASA announcement page. So if you go on that announcement page, it'll give you the funding announcement. It'll give you the questions so you can see them ahead of time before you go into the application itself. It'll give you a document that are the instructions, and then it'll give you a link to this form assembly form. And you just click that link and you'll be right into the application. So some required documents to make sure that you submit with your application. One is a signed resolution. So that's from your governing body that designates an authorized official that's authorized to apply for, accept, decline, or cancel the grant. So the authorized official and the individual signing the resolution can't be the same person. Usually the resolution is signed by the president of the board. And then we understand that you may not have a board meeting from the time you want to apply to the time that the application is due. So just send us a copy of the resolution, even if it's unsigned. And then later when you get it signed, you can send that in to us as well. We're going to ask you to submit all the job descriptions for anyone who's going to be on the budget on the grant. And then there's a work plan and a year 1 budget. And that's a template that it's TASA's template. So in those documents that you download with the questions and the application instructions, as well as in the application, there's a link to that template that you can download and complete. And then there's a place in the application for you to upload it. So you send it to us with your application. And then we have some optional documents, which, while they're not required, will be used as a tool to evaluate the organization's commitment to meeting the requirements of the grant. And one of them is you can submit a letter of commitment signed by your board of directors, signed by your ED, just saying that you understand those goals of the grant, like meeting the minimum standards, working within the population of focus, that type thing, and that you're committed to do so by the end of the grant period. And by grant period, I mean the 2 years. And then you can submit a support document from a member of your sexual assault response team or another community organization, again, whose partnership is important for the success of administering the grant. So I want to backtrack to talk again about really the purpose of the grant is to provide the funding. TASA will be providing the technical assistance and support to those organizations that are committed to building a strong sexual assault program. By the end of the 2-year grant period, we want organizations to be providing all the minimum services to meet the definition of a sexual assault program in the Texas Government Code, Chapter 420, to meet the minimum service standards for sexual assault programs in Texas, and to actually apply for a sexual assault training program certification through the Office of the Attorney General. So, we're going to be there with you as you go through this process. And really, again, this grant is for organizations that don't really have that state level funding right now, but are wanting to get there. And so really wanting to build their capacity, their infrastructure for that strong sexual assault program. So grantees will use funding for, there's a wide range of activities in the funding announcement. We really want you to look at the funding announcement, read all of those activities, really plan for which activities will best position you to meet all those goals of the grant that we just talked about. So in those activities, I'm just going to go through a few of them to give you an idea. So it's can use this funding for 24-hour crisis hotline, for advocacy, for accompaniment, for administrative expenses as well, rent, utilities, bookkeeping, all of those type things, phone, office equipment, costs associated with assessing the capacity of your organization to develop emergency operation plans. So review of job descriptions, review of policies and procedures, strategic planning, technical assistance and training, costs associated with data integrity, so safeguarding your data of your clients, costs associated with strengthening partnerships with hospitals and law enforcement agencies or community-based organizations, crisis intervention, public awareness to develop materials. This grant is a little bit different in that it allows incentives like hiring, retention, second language skill incentives, working with experience, working with underserved communities, wellness incentives. There is a cap on incentives, so it cannot exceed 10% of your total grant award, but they are allowed. You can purchase IT equipment, can do public education. Also, we want to recognize where we know public education is a minimum service, it's an allowable activity. It should not be a major focus of the pilot project. So it cannot exceed 10% of your total grant award as well. And then purchasing or upgrading digital platforms, purchasing or upgrading electronic devices, computers, tablets, smartphones, road assistance plans for employees who have significant travel. And then another unique thing about this grant, it can provide survivor support, including third payment parties on behalf of survivors, or for the organization to purchase specific items for survivors and have them on hand. So those things also, the survivor support cannot exceed 10% of your total grant award, but they are allowable. And then I want to go in just to a little bit more depth about education expenses. Again, while we know it's an allowable activity, it's not meant to be the major focus on the pilot project. What that focus, what I really we are thinking about is to get out in the community and let folks know that your services are available while you're spending that time building services and building those minimum services to meet the standards. That's why it cannot exceed 10% of your total. So again, hiring, retention, second language skills, those kinds of incentives also allowable, cannot exceed 10% of your total grant award. And then survivor support, including third-party payments. So if someone needs rent or utilities, you can pay those things directly. Cannot give cash to survivors, but you can pay on their behalf. And then on the template that you're going to use for your budget, there are some calculations at the bottom of the form that calculate the incentives and the survivor support, and it'll turn red. It'll tell you if you're over 10% so that you can go back and adjust the budget. Because education expenses can be in a lot of different line items, there isn't a calculation to calculate that. You will need to do that yourself, but these two do have calculation tools. So evaluation of applications. The full list is on page 3 of the funding announcement. And we went through them before, like what folks were going to be looking for, what we're prioritizing, but you can see them on page 3 of the funding announcement. And then our population of focus is primarily survivors of sexual assault who are adults, who were assaulted by someone other than a family or household member. This project can include services to teens and young adults, so 13 to 17, particularly survivors in underserved populations, those needing assistance with safety concerns, also related to COVID-19. So the American Rescue Plan, where this grant came from, was supplemental funding because of the pandemic. And then we do have an exception to this population of focus. These funds can be used to serve a survivor who was assaulted by a family or household member if that survivor is seeking services for the sexual assault and that survivor doesn't qualify for services under HHSC. But domestic violence services, services to children under the age of 13 should not be provided with this funding. So reporting, we just want to give you an idea of what you would be reporting. We do have quarterly reports. Those are up there with the time frame and also the due dates. Most of those are numerical. We do have a few narrative questions in those reports, but most of those are really like victims served and things like that. We have an annual report that's due each October 1st. That annual report goes from, or I'm sorry, it's due October 31st. That annual report is year, and it comes at the bottom of at the end of the fourth quarter report. So you really, but when you finish your fourth quarter report, it goes right into the annual report. So quarterly report, we do collect information about clients served, the age, race, ethnicity, other demographics. We're not saying that you have to require folks to give you this information. We're saying in the midst of the intake, if you get it, then we do ask those questions. We report number of unique clients who receive each service, and then number of services provided. And then there's narrative questions on programming. So the annual report is all narrative, and it's really related to your activities. One of the most important questions on it is going to be impact of the funding. So what were you able to do that you wouldn't have been able to do if this funding wasn't available? And we're really sending these stories into the state and the federal funders so that they really understand the impact of this funding and why it might be so important to continue it. We have developed some tools to help you with reporting. The first is we have a tool that will help you assign unique client IDs so that you have your IDs connected to names, but no one else would have that information. And then we have tools to track unique clients per service, and then tools to track instances of services. Those first three are really optional. You can use them if you already have another method in place. You can certainly use your own. You're not required to use them. The last is a tracking log, and that's for survivor support expenses. You must use that one if you're going to use funds for survivor support. You don't have to hand it in to us, but if our finance staff want to look at it, they may ask you for it, and then you would send it. It will be by unique client IDs, so there's no identifying information on it. It just tracks your third-party payments and purchases that you made for specific clients. So, helpful documents. There's a link to the grant announcement. The full announcement is there. It gives you all the information about this grant. The grant application document is there, so you can download that. You can see the questions that are going to be asked when you do hit that button to say you're ready to start the application. And then there's application instructions as well that go through every question and give you a little bit more detail of what we're looking for. And then some more documents. The work plan and the application budget template can be found in the grant application questions document and the instructions document. I will tell you that we had to make a change to the budget template. So if you've gone on our website and have already pulled that budget template down before today, you will need to go back to one of these documents and pull that budget template down again. Very sorry for that. There were some cells that were locked that shouldn't have been locked, and we fixed it, and it is back on our website correct now. And then there's a sample resolution of governing body. You can use that if you have one already. You don't have to use that one. So next steps would be review that funding announcement so that you have a really good understanding of the grant requirements and what activities are really allowable, what activities you think you might want to apply for that really helps you like get towards the goals of the grant. So develop your project, use the link to the application that's posted on our webpage, and the link actually says click here when you're ready to start the application. And you click on that and it takes you right into the application. When you get into the application, at the top right corner, there is a way it says, do you want to save it? So if you go on the application and you start it and you need to, stop that session and come back later, you can click save. It'll let you put in a password. Let me start over. It will ask you for your email and a password, and then it will send you a link to get back into your application. So, you'll click that link when you're ready to go back in and put in your password, and all of your stuff will be saved. It's in form assembly, and you can pick up where you left off. And then await the funding decision. So again, we expect to send out notifications by September 22nd. We will notify you, whether you got the grant or not. And then for questions on the grant, you can send emails to ARP-SA@TASA.org. We can answer general questions on the grant and programming. Because this is a competitive grant, we can't assist with grant writing or really do any pre-assessment of your grant proposals. But if you have questions about the grant or programming, what's allowed, what's not allowed, you can certainly contact us. And questions?
So Peggy, I just wanted to say one other thing about kind of technical assistance. As you mentioned in the beginning, these are really kind of pilot projects, and the goal is to have a lot of support behind them. Just wanted to make sure that folks understand that does include some kind of like required check-ins and TA, and the TALSA staff will be providing some training on, how to really make sure that we're meeting some of the best practices around developing strong sexual assault programs that are trauma informed, that are accessible to a wide range of survivors, and so you'll be getting, as well as some financial TA available. So it's the other reason that it's smaller is that it really is going to be all hands on deck for us at TASA as well. So our program support and training team will be involved. Our CEO Rose will be involved. Our finance department will be involved in providing organization with just as much support and training for the staff to really develop. Like, we know that y'all are doing amazing work already, and just to help really build really strong programs, to be really transparent. Texas is huge, and it's just not getting served because we have great programs, but the capacity is just not there. And so if we can kind of develop a model for helping support programs who are meeting the need the best they can without the resources, and show funders like, hey, if you put the resources behind and take this approach, you can really help expand the availability of services and create some strong programs. So just wanted to make sure that people did recognize that there is some, especially early on, probably kind of monthly, at least check in, some trainings, and then TA will always be available to you as well.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, because there is a requirement for monthly TA for folks on this grant. And then, of course, it's available more frequently at any time. But we will reach out and schedule monthly TA with you.
So we did have a couple of questions, Peggy. One is kind of around the reporting. Is there a sample report? And will the questions include outcomes of the work plan?
So, good question. We do have a report. If funded, we will send that report out to you and go through a training on reporting. There is some outcomes, but it's really not, there's some higher level outcomes that HHS is looking for, but the questions are really built in to your report, if that makes sense. You will do a work plan, and you'll tell us on progress reports how you're progressing on your work plan. Does that make sense? So there's a really general question about, tell us about your activities, and that will be your time to really tell us about your progress in doing the things that are on your work plan.
Yeah, and a lot of the questions are very it still is ultimately a federal grant, so we have to, there's a long list, and Peggy kind of went through those, but kind of a long list of like the numbers that we need to report to HHSC because they want it, and then they have to report to HHS. So there's those, and then the narrative questions, we're really trying to again build the case for continuing this funding. Like, how are you, not just the numbers, but what's the impact, what's the unique impact of this funding that you've been able to accomplish because of this funding. And then there was another question to Peggy about is the location of the program a factor?
Okay, if I understand the question correctly, it's in Texas, right? So it's not, the location is not, there's not like priority locations. If that's, is that what the question is?
Essentially, yes.
Yes.
Because they're located in an area where there's kind of a gap, but there are some centers in the area, and so they're filling the gap. And I just want to see, is that going to help or hurt them that there are already other centers located nearby.
We're really going to be looking at what that center is, or what that organization is trying to do to meet the goals of the grant. So there's not something that would say you're not eligible if there's another center near you. Tim, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Perfect.
And I noticed someone did ask a question that you've already pulled down the budget, and there are some locked cells. We did fix that. If anyone has gone into the application itself to start it, I guess I will ask that question, because we had to fix that link in the application itself. So if you just pull down the budget, you can go to the website and pull down the budget template again, and you'll have the correct one. If you've actually started the application and pulled down the budget from the application, you'll need to contact me and we'll get that. That one will be fixed, but you might not be using the correct one if you pulled it down from the application itself. But a fix to that would be you could go to the website and pull it down from those documents and have the correct one, because it is correct on the website. Any other questions?
I have one question. I apologize for being late. I was running late from another meeting, but I saw on there this is supposed to be recorded. Is it possible to get a copy of the recording shortly so that I can kind of review what I missed? Great.
Tim, will that be posted? Will we send that out? Sorry.
Yeah, when we're done, Peggy, if you can do what we usually do.
Yeah, okay.
It's usually within a day that we're able to get a link, and then we can send it back to at least the folks that were registered in here, and then we'll probably put it up on the website as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay. Well, we really want to thank you for being here, for being interested in this kind of what we think is a unique opportunity, and let us know if you have any questions and if we can be of assistance.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gonna stop the